Hello, Wilberforce here, and you're welcome. Today we'll be discussing adjective, which is the very last topic or type of major word class. So, what then is an adjective? An adjective describes a noun or a pronoun, or an adjective modifies a noun or a pronoun. Examples of adjective: we can have red, tall, long, beautiful, etc. So that means there are many examples of adjective. We said earlier that major word classes are up to infinity, and so adjectives are also up to infinity. There are so many examples of adjectives. Great. Okay, so let's now look at how adjectives act in sentences. We said they modify or describe a noun or a pronoun. So in this first sentence, the tall man came here. Tall over here is describing the man, which is a noun. It is giving us detailed information about the man. So over here we are seeing that the man that came there isn't short, but rather tall. So tall here is an example of an adjective which is modifying or describing the man, which is a noun. In the next example, we sat in the beautiful blue car. In this sentence, we see two adjectives describing a car, that is beautiful and blue, which means that two or more adjectives or even one adjective can describe a particular noun. It doesn't necessarily mean an adjective should describe a noun, or a specific number of adjectives should describe any specific number of nouns. Two or more adjectives can describe one noun, as we see in this sentence. Great. So in this sentence, we see blue and beautiful, which are adjectives describing the noun car. Great. So the next on the list is types of adjectives. There are a number of adjectives. Seven adjectives. There are 7 adjectives we will be discussing in our edition today. And so the first type of adjective we will discuss is the descriptive adjective. So the descriptive adjective provides information or attributes to the noun or pronoun they are modifying or describing. So descriptive adjectives are usually the adjectives that come in mind when we are asked to give examples of adjectives. For instance, red, tall, long, beautiful, ugly are all types or examples of descriptive adjectives. Now we should also note that descriptive adjectives are also referred to as quantitative adjectives. So in some books you will see quantitative adjectives instead of descriptive adjectives. So examples of descriptive adjectives, we can have fast, hungry, clean, neat, etc. Okay, so examples as used in sentences, we have I ran fast. So fast over here is a descriptive adjective. It is describing how I ran. So it means I am not a slow runner, but I ran fast. In the second example, we have the hungry cat. The hungry or hungry over here is an adjective. It is describing that the particular cat we are talking about is not the one full, but the hungry one. And so descriptive adjective hungry is used to describe the cat or the noun cat in this sentence. So the next type of adjective we will look at is the quantitative adjective. Now the quantitative adjective, from the name quantitative, talks about how many or how small something is. And so quantitative adjectives describe the quantity of something. So they describe the quantity of something. That is, they answer the question how much or how many. So quantitative talks about how much or it answers the question how much or how many. Example, we can have 1, the number 1 or 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up to infinity. We can also have half, we can have many, few, a lot, small, etc., etc. Okay, so example in sentences, we have how many cars do you have? Now many over here is talking about quantity, so it is an example of this type of adjective. The answer to that question is I have 3 cars. 3 over here is also talking about quantity, which is also an example to this question. So in this example, we have many here being an example of quantitative adjective, and 3 also being another example. In example 2, we have one of these boys was here yesterday. One of these boys was here yesterday. And so one of these boys means that if, let's say, there are a group of 7 boys, it is just one person, which is talking about quantity. And so 1 over here is an example of quantitative adjective. Okay, so the next type of adjective is referred to as a demonstrative adjective. Now, the demonstrative adjective describes which noun you are referring to. Demonstrative adjective also, they usually come before the word or noun they are modifying or describing. So for instance, if they are describing a car, the demonstrative adjective would come before the car, the word car, and so we have something like this car. So example of demonstrative adjective is or are these, this, that, those, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is used to describe nouns that are closer to you. Now these nouns are supposed to be singular nouns, so this is used to describe singular nouns that are closer to you. That is used to describe singular nouns that are far from you. That means the nouns that are singular you are describing shouldn't be closer to you. So I can say that chair. That chair, for instance, means that the chair I am talking about is not closer to me. Those is also used to describe plural nouns, but the plural noun should not be closer to you. So those is used to describe nouns that are plural and not closer to you. These are used to describe plural nouns, but the plural nouns should be closer to you. So this plural form is these, that plural form is those. Okay, so you have example in sentences. Example 1, this bicycle is mine, which means that bicycle, the particular bicycle you are talking about is closer to me, and that bicycle is mine. So this is a demonstrative adjective. Those roads are beautiful. So we underline the words this and those. The next, possessive adjectives. They show possession. That is, they describe to whom something belongs. Examples, we can have mine, his, your, you, theirs, I, etc., etc. Great. So examples in sentences. Example 1. Our English teacher is fair. Our is showing possession, that there is no English teacher but our English teacher. Example 2. Those books on the table are theirs. Theirs over here is also showing possession. So we underline theirs and our. Example 3. This bicycle is mine. and mine over here is showing possession. So the next, interrogative adjectives. Interrogative from the name, interrogates, that is, it asks questions, or interrogation means asking questions. So interrogative adjective asks questions, that is, they are used to form questions. So example of adjectives are, or interrogative adjectives are which, whose, what, etc. Great. So examples in sentences. Example 1. What animal is that? What is an example of an interrogative adjective. So it is asking a question, and that is why there is a question mark after the sentence. Example 2. Whose child is this? Whose child is this? Which is also, whose is also an example of an interrogative adjective, and so it ends with a question mark. Okay, so the next, distributive adjectives. Distributive adjectives describe specific members of a group. So let's say, for instance, there are 7 people in a group. What distributive adjective does is it talks about one particular person of the group or a number of particular people of the group. Example of distributive adjectives are, we have each, any, either, neither, etc., etc. Okay. So let us now look at examples as used in sentences. Example 1. Each of you should wear a uniform tomorrow. Now, in each of you should wear a uniform, it is telling us that every single person the speaker was talking to is obliged to wear a uniform tomorrow. So let's say if there are 7 people, the speaker is trying to say that every single person or all the 7 people should wear a uniform to school or to wherever they are going tomorrow. Example 2. Every rose has its thorn. Every rose has its thorn, which is trying to tell us that you would never see a rose without its thorn. That means all roses have their personal or own thorns. Okay, so we see each and every underlined because they are examples of distributive adjectives. Now let us look at the next type of adjective. That will be the very last type of adjective we will be looking at in this edition. That's articles. Articles in its form, they are actually part of speech on its own. They form part of the minor part of speech. But when you look at articles critically, you see that they describe nouns. And so because of that quality, some grammarians has described articles as a type of adjective. So we'll look at articles and some examples and see how they come in play. Okay, so one may ask, what then is an article? Now, an article is used to describe which noun we are referring to. So there are 3 main types of articles. We have the and the de. Let us now look at how these articles are used. And an are used to refer to an unspecific noun. That is, the noun we are talking about can be any noun. We are not talking about a particular noun. But the de is used to refer to a particular noun. For instance, when I say the boy, I am talking about a particular boy you and I are aware of. So and de are examples of articles, and they are the main examples of articles. Okay, so let us now look at examples in sentences. As I gave earlier on, you can say a boy is going to school. Now, in a boy is going to school, it means that the boy we are talking about is not a specific boy. It can be any boy. It can be Kofi, Yao, Akwesi, or even Kwame. We can also have an egg is on the table. An egg is on the table can mean any egg is on the table. But when we say the student is coming, then it means that you and I know a specific student, and then we are saying that that particular student is coming. So there is used to talk about a particular person, whereas a and an are used to talk about unspecific people or items. Okay, so this brings us to the end of the types of adjectives. The next we would have, we are looking at degrees of adjectives. Now we talk about degrees of adjectives. We are talking about the positive, comparative, or superlative form of adjective. This talks about when we are talking of or we are comparing two or more things. Okay, so positive, comparative, and then superlative. Now these, if you want to know when these can be used, it will depend on the number of people you are talking about or the number of things you are talking about. So we will take them one after the other so that we would know when we would use each of these, or when each of these usually come in place. So first we have the positive. Now the positive is used when the adjective is in its raw form, that is its normal form. Example, we can have an adjective as beautiful. So you see beautiful is in its normal form. Nothing has been added to beautiful, nothing has been taken out from beautiful. Usually these adverbs are not used to compare, but they are used to describe. So positive adjectives are usually used to describe and not compare. Okay, so as we said, they are used to describe and not to compare. Example, she is beautiful. Over here, we are not comparing anyone with she. We are just saying that she is beautiful. We are just describing her. So positive adjectives are usually used to describe. We can have more examples as handsome, tall, short, long, ugly, etc., etc. Okay, so the next, comparative adjectives. Now comparative adjectives are used to compare two things. Let's say you are comparing Kofi with Ama, or you are comparing the table with the chair, or you are comparing the soup with the stew. So it is used to compare two things. You can even compare things of the same kind, like table and table. You can say this table is taller than this table. That is, you are comparing two tables. So comparative adjectives are not used to describe, but they are actually used to compare two things. Note, they are used to compare two things. So the underlined word is two things, not just. So when we want to compare 10 things, we use another form of adjective. But when there are two things, then comparative form of adjective or degree of adjective comes in play. So we can have example as AC is more beautiful than Abigail. So over here we see another word, more, being added to the word beautiful. So it has changed beautiful from the positive form to the comparative form. So we can see clearly that AC is being compared with Abigail, and there are only two people in this place. So that means we are comparing two people. Okay, so the next degree of adjective is the superlative adjective. The superlative adjective is used when we are comparing three or more things. So when what we are comparing or the object we are comparing is more than two, then we use the superlative form. The superlative form is also used to compare things, not to describe things. Okay, so example, she is the most beautiful in her class. So we see most beautiful over here. So beautiful was changed to the comparative form as more beautiful, and then to the superlative form as most beautiful. Now you should note that her class was used. That is, there are more than 3 persons in her class, and that is why we use the comparative form, not the superlative form. Okay, so we should note that the degrees of adjective work for only descriptive types of adjectives. So if the adjective is not the descriptive type of adjective, then we cannot use the degrees of adjective. So we can't use degrees of adjective when we are talking about quantitative or any type of adjective. Okay, so let us now look at typical examples under each of these degree type of adjective. But before that, let us take some notes. So the first note is, if the descriptive adjective has one syllable, then we are to add er to turn it into the comparative form, and est to turn it into the superlative form. So when the descriptive adjective we are talking about has just one syllable, like for instance, tall has only one syllable, then if we want to change it to the comparative form, we add er to tall, and if we want to change it to the superlative form, we add est to become tallest. Okay, so let us now have examples under them. First example, tall. Now because tall has only one syllable, if you want to change it to the comparative form, it becomes taller, and to the superlative it becomes tallest. Another example, we can have strong. Comparative, stronger. Superlative, strongest. Where we can have garners, strongest. Next example, loud. Comparative, we have louder. Superlative, we have loudest. Small, smaller, smallest. Big, bigger, biggest. Short, shorter, shortest. So these are examples under the very first rule or first condition. Tall, taller, tallest, strong, stronger, strongest, loud, louder, loudest, small, smaller, smallest, big, bigger, biggest, and short, shorter, shortest. There are so many examples. We should remember that we said major word classes, they do not have an end. There are so many examples under major word classes, so there are so many examples under this particular condition. Great. So the condition 2. If you want to turn an adjective, that is a descriptive adjective, which has 3 or more syllables, then we add words like many and most to the word to change the form to the comparative and then to the superlative form. For instance, beautiful is in the positive form. In the comparative form, we have more beautiful, and in the superlative form, we have most beautiful. Okay, so you can have examples. Positive, comparative, superlative. So beautiful. You have more beautiful, most beautiful. Example 2, famous, more famous, most famous. So we see that beautiful is a 3-syllable word. Difficult, another example, more difficult, most difficult. Confused, more confused, most confused. Important, more important, most important. Okay, so there are many examples under this condition. Okay, there are some exceptions to these rules. These two rules, there are some exceptions. Some words behave different from these two rules. For instance, we can have the word good. Now, good is just a 1-syllable word, but to change good from the positive to the comparative form, we cannot add er to become gooder and est to become goodest. But if you want to change good from the positive form to the comparative form, good then becomes better, and then to the superlative form we have best. So good, better, best. Another example, we can have bad. Bad, worse, worse. And then we can have many, more, most. You can also have much, more, most. Great. So this brings us to the end of adjective and also the end of major word classes. Thank you.